Hello, happy Tuesday, happy Earth Day. Welcome to this week's Deep Dive. I'm Alex Burkill, meteorologist and presenter here at the Met Office. And as we do every Tuesday, I'm coming to you from our headquarters here in Exeter. And as with every week, if you enjoy anything that I talk about today, make sure you hit the like button, share it with anyone else who you think might be interested in it, and do leave a comment because I will be answering some of those questions later on. And we do also answer some of the questions in our Weather Studio Live, which will be back this Friday with Honor and Aidan. We took a week off because of Good Friday, but yes, our Weather Studio Live is back this week. But we're here for the deep dive. What do I have to talk about? Well, we're over halfway through both spring and also through April, so I thought I'd take a little bit of a look back and also, of course, a look ahead. So let's start that. First of all, I want to look through the weather we can expect through the next few days and a bit beyond. I don't want to go into too much detail because Honor will have the 10-day trend available on Wednesday, so don't want to tread on her toes too much. But nonetheless, let's have a little look. And currently, we have an area of low pressure just to the west-northwest of the UK. We're already seeing some of that rain pushing across parts of Northern Ireland. And that rain associated with that front is going to continue to make its way eastwards. And so as we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see the cloud building, the rain pushing its way in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and maybe just scroll back a little bit so we can see that heavy rain coming through. But yes, some fairly wet weather pushing its way through as we go through this evening and overnight. And then tomorrow, we see that eventually clearing away towards the east-southeast. Worth bearing in mind, if I just scroll back, that actually large parts of Scotland, down the eastern, northeastern side of England as well, not really seeing much, if any, of that rain pushing through, so staying largely dry here. But for other places, it does look pretty wet as that pushes in. So how wet? Well, let's look at some of our rainfall totals. And here I have our 24-hour rainfall totals. If I just run these through as we go through Wednesday, and we will see a couple of things. So yeah, as we go through Wednesday, we can see some pretty high totals across this kind of southwestern half of the UK, if you will, across Northern Ireland, Wales, southern southwestern England. That's where we're going to see the heaviest rain. We're talking quite widely in this area. 10 to 15 millimetres, locally 20 to 40, perhaps over the high ground of Northern Ireland, the Mournes, we could see around 50 millimetres. Some models hinted at around 60 to 80. I think they're overdoing it a little bit, so I think the totals that I just said more likely. So that's pretty wet, and there will be some blustery winds, but we shouldn't see too many impacts. That being said, a lot of that rain is going to be coming in just 3 to 6 hours, so a bit of surface flooding is possible. And as well as that, because of some of this coming through in time for morning rush hour, depending on where you are, that could cause some disruption. So do take care on the roads if you're heading out early. There could be some issues. We haven't got a warning issued at the moment, not expecting any, but nonetheless it is going to be a pretty wet picture as we go through this evening, overnight and early tomorrow. But thereafter, what happens? Well, let's get rid of the jet stream. It's not what I want to show at the moment. And if we just dart ahead to the early hours of Thursday, that's Wednesday evening, but if we run, Wednesday I meant, that's what confused me earlier. As we go through Wednesday, as we go through the end of Wednesday, and you can see, well, through the morning, through lunchtime, it clears away towards the east-southeast. Then behind it, there's just a scattering of showers following in behind. And then overnight Wednesday into Thursday, if I just pause it a little bit further on, let's go to Thursday morning. And we end up in a bit of a cold. So that's when we have the system that pushed through towards the east of us, another system, low pressure, waiting out towards the west. And then instead over the UK, we have a bit of a ridge, and so a quieter period. So Wednesday night into Thursday, it's looking pretty quiet. Could be a bit chilly first thing Thursday morning. But we're in between those systems. And then through Thursday itself, actually a fairly decent day. A few showers here and there, but on the whole, largely fine. Otherwise, then our attention then turns to another system that's coming in from the west. So later Thursday, more wet weather pushing its way into Northern Ireland, and then the system's likely to track its way in as we go into Friday. But there are some question marks about this system. Our model, the Met Office Global model, which is the one that I have behind me here, that's a little bit too quick, I think, with how it progresses across the UK with this system that goes through on Friday. So I think if we looked at EC, it has everything a little bit further west. It's a bit slower bringing that system in. And so I think This rain really is more likely to be a bit more over kind of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, perhaps just about fringing into the far west of England and Wales as we go through Friday evening. Most places actually staying dry through much of Friday. Also worth bearing in mind, Friday morning could be even chillier than Thursday morning for some of us too. But back to Friday, eventually this system will push through, but similar to how it's not quite got the position right, I think our model's overdoing the rain amounts as it pushes eastwards across the UK as we go through into the weekend. I think really it's likely to break up quite a lot, and so I think some eastern parts aren't going to see a huge amount of that rain as it pushes through overnight Friday into Saturday, and so it's largely dry. But then that clears through, and then there's another system out in the west, and again the position of this I think is a little bit too far east. So once more, I think as we go through more so into Sunday, the next system comes through and we're going to see some wet weather towards the northwest of the UK. How much of that pushes its way across eastern parts and towards the south? Not really that sure. I think we're actually going to stay largely dry, but towards the northwest. So there's the potential that we could see both those two bands of rain, the one Friday into Saturday and then another one on Sunday, pushing across. But really, I think a lot of it's perhaps going to be a bit further west-southwest than some of the model data that I have behind me may suggest. Still, a little bit all to play for. One thing that I'm a bit more confident about, though, is high pressure towards the south-southeast, and that plays a part in the weather that we can expect next week. But before then, I just wanted to have a little look at our temperatures, and I think that's the wrong one. Let's get this up. And if I pick somewhere towards the south, for example, and here we have our max and our min temperatures as we go through the next few days. That doesn't quite show. There we go. That's a little bit better, more what I wanted to hint at. And you can see two things really. After a little bit of a dip as we go through the middle of this week, our temperatures start to climb again as we go through towards the weekend and beginning of next week. So more likely to get into the low 20s. But also look at our overnight temperatures. We're only talking a degree or so. But yeah, Thursday morning and more so Friday morning do look to be a little chilly, a little fresh compared to some of the other nights this week. Nothing extraordinary. If we just look further north, just for example, and the trend's similar, really a gradual rise in our temperatures as we go through this week, and also a slight dip in our overnight temperatures both Thursday and Friday morning. But what happens thereafter, and like I said, I don't want to go too much on to what Honor will be talking about in her 10-day trend tomorrow, but just to capture it, and these are our various members, and when you take them all together, they show the most likely setups that we're going to see. And if I dart to this time next week, say, let's go a little bit further ahead. Here we go. Here's next Tuesday. Actually, let's not go that far. Let's go to Sunday. Let's go to Monday. And so the most likely setup is this one in the left-hand side of the screen. And it has that system that I mentioned coming in on Sunday, so pushing its way into northwestern parts. But actually the high pressure across mainland Europe starts to build back in and feed its way in across the UK, and that would do two things. That would settle our weather down and actually bring in some more warm air, which is why we're starting to see temperatures rising as we go through into next week, and we're likely to continue to see them doing so. Worth bearing in mind that the second and third most likely scenarios for this next Monday have the frontal stuff towards the northwest of the UK, a little bit more across the country, so the highs are a little bit less developed. But nonetheless, that's a slightly more favoured chance at the moment. Then, as we go through, and if we look towards Tuesday, I've gone too far ahead. Now we're looking at Wednesday, but the most likely setup, and even the second, even the third's not too dissimilar. The most and second most likely setups have high pressure well and truly across the UK. So the high that was here has fed its way in and then become more dominant. So I think there's a reasonable chance as we go through next week that we are going to see high pressure becoming more dominant. We talked about this if you watched my 10-day trend last week. I talked about it happening around the end of this week through this weekend. And I think it's been pushed back ever so slightly. But nonetheless, I think as we go through next week, we are going to see that, or beginning of next week, we are going to see that high pressure pushing its way in. What happens thereafter, and that's where there are some question marks. I've darted ahead to next Saturday, but tell the story quite nicely. The most likely, albeit only 13% chance, so not particularly high. We are looking, what, several days away, 10, 11 days away by this point, but still has high pressure across the UK. So there's a reasonable chance that the high pressure that's likely to dominate early next week could stick around through much of next week and as we go into the beginning of May as well. However, there's also a reasonable chance, probably a similar amount of chance, to be honest, that some systems from the northwest could push their way in instead, and so we would see something a bit more changeable, particularly towards northern and western parts. All the time, worth bearing in mind, with this high that comes in, we could see some significant warmth across southern parts in particular. That's pretty likely early to middle of next week. We're talking low to mid 20s, that kind of thing, with some settled weather, so feeling particularly fine to end April. And we could have some more fine, relatively warm weather as we go through into the beginning of May as well, but just some question marks as to exactly what's going to come in from the northwest. So either the high pressure will build and then stick around for a little while, or it could build and then retreat back as some fronts push through. So a little bit all to play for. If we just, whilst we're on that topic, if we just look at our multi-model probabilistic pressure trend, and you'll no doubt have seen these before if you're a regular deep dive or 10-day trend viewer, but in case you haven't, the reds indicating that high pressure is more likely as we go through the next 2 weeks. And you can see really the transition from the neutral setup, the greens, to the high pressure was always indicated to be late this week and as we go through this coming weekend. So although there's a weather system towards the northwest of the UK this weekend, the general pattern will be the high pressure that's coming its way in, and fairly strong idea that that high pressure is going to be more dominant as we go through next week and perhaps even into the beginning of May, albeit the percentages start to drop down. It's a very red picture behind me. Previous model runs have all been in agreement that high pressure is going to be the dominant story as we head through the end of April and into the beginning of May. But yes, still some question marks as to exactly how long it lasts. Honor will have more about that on tomorrow's 10-day trend. What else did I want to talk about? Let's look globally quickly then, because there's some severe weather happening on the other side of the Atlantic. And if we dart ahead across parts of America, we've already seen some fatal flooding in parts of Oklahoma in recent days, and there's more heavy thundery rain to come across parts of Texas, Kansas and Oklahoma still. Fortunately, the heaviest rain looks like it'll be a little bit further west compared to where we've already seen it, particularly as we go through kind of Thursday and towards the end of the week. We are going to see some significant rainfall totals. We're talking 50 to 100 millimetres in just a few hours, and some prolonged rain could lead to more than 200 millimetres in some places. Worth bearing in mind, in this part of America, the April average is only around 50 to 100 millimetres. So this is a substantial amount of rain. No wonder that we're going to see some further flooding, and this could cause some fairly disruptive, well, it's going to cause some disruption, could cause some major problems as well. It's not just the heavy rain that's going to cause some problems. Like I said, it's going to be thundery, and so we need to watch out for some large hail, also the risk of tornadoes, but I think it's the heavy rain that's most likely to cause some major impacts here. Back to the UK though, and as I mentioned at the start, we are now well over halfway through April and we are halfway through spring. So I just wanted to have a little gander, a little look at how we are doing statistics wise at this stage in the month. And this chart behind me looks at mean temperature through spring so far, and it's a cumulative chart, so it compares how we are for this stage of the month and so far through this month compared to previous records. The black line in the middle is our average based on the 1991 to 2020 data. The orange line at the top is the record. The blue line at the bottom is the record for the lowest. Orange at the top, record for the warmest. And the dotted blue line is this current year with the orange shaded area showing that we are well above average for this stage in the month and have been really through, season. Through this whole season, it's been significantly warmer than average. And actually, if we look at just where we are, we're currently just about above the record for this stage in spring. Now, there is a lot of spring still to come, so you can't make too many bold statements. But technically, at this stage in spring, we haven't had a warmer first, well, like, what are we, 50 days of the season before, since our records began. So it has been pretty warm indeed. Just to look at a similar chart, but this time for April, and it's a similar picture, well above average, albeit nowhere near the record. The one thing that's worth bearing in mind is it's our maximum temperatures that have been so far above average, which have pushed us, when you look at spring, so close to or just that little bit above the record. If we look at our minimum temperatures, and here I have the minimum temperature chart for April, and actually our minimum temperatures through the last 2-3 weeks or so, they've been nothing really to write home about. We've had some colder spells. So even when we had the fine settled weather during the first week, 2 weeks of April, at this time of year, fine settled weather by night means it's going to turn quite chilly unless you have some really warm air around us, which we didn't. So although it was pleasantly warm by day, it was a bit chilly overnight. And so that's why when we look at our minimum temperatures so far this month, they're pretty much close to average. Whereas our mean temperature and our maximum temperatures, they're way above. Way above. What are we looking at rainfall wise? Oops, I've pressed the wrong button. And if we look, similar chart, but this time looking at our rainfall for spring so far, and you can see just how dry it's been through large chunks of March. That line is so flat. We had barely any rain, and then again we had like a bit of rain, and then another flat line through the first week or so of April, and then we've had a bit more unsettled weather recently, but well below the average line, and not too far away, albeit not particularly close to the driest spring on record, or driest spring for this point in the season on record. But if we look at our April, and the first 11 days, barely any rain. I think there was a little blip of rain around earlier on in the month, but barely any rain for the first 11 days. And then, yeah, last week, if you're on Easter holidays, you'll have no doubt been aware, we had some more unsettled, wetter weather that came through, and so it's well above the record now. I think the record's, what's that, about 16 or 17? Oops, I've darted back. Let's just get that chart back up. And the record, yeah, so we're now nowhere near the record for driest April, but nonetheless it is still significantly drier than average. We do have more wet weather coming through as we go through tonight and later on this week, so we're going to see some those totals rising again, but I think at the end of the month it is going to be drier than average. Then the last thing on the rainfall stats I just wanted to highlight was the fact that it's really just been this chunk recently which has brought some rain around. In fact, Good Friday in particular, the wettest day so far this April, with a very wet day. I don't know what you were doing, but we were having a fence built, and I felt sorry for the man building that because it was raining so heavily. Right, the last statistic that I wanted to look back at was our sunshine amounts. Here's our map for sunshine through the spring, but it doesn't paint that much of an interesting picture. So let's just look at April. And this map is comparing what we've seen so far through April to the average for the whole month. Now, we're only 3 weeks in. This is data up to and including yesterday, the 21st. So the first 3 weeks of April compared to the whole month. And so we're less than 3/4 of the way through, 70% at this stage. But some places have already seen significantly more than the average for the whole month. The UK as a whole has seen 106% of the average for the whole month. So we've already had 6% more than the average, even though we still have another 30%, another 10 days left or whatever of the month still to go. In fact, some parts of Western Scotland have seen even more than that. So it has been very dry. It's also been very sunny, which I'm sure you're aware of, particularly across Western Scotland and down through parts of England as well. Largely sunny skies for many places. Then what else did I want to talk about? I think the only thing I have left is to talk about the Lyrid meteor shower. So we get lots of meteor showers coming through the year. The Lyrid one, it's not the most dramatic of them. The Germanid one later on in the year has a few more meteor showers. But nonetheless, through its peak, you're looking at around 18 meteors coming through an hour. So a good chance of seeing something. And actually, whilst it appears from mid-April for a week or so, it's actually peaking around now. So the 22nd today is the peak. So tonight, more so Wednesday morning, that's when you have the greatest chance of seeing the Lyrid meteor shower. Now, meteor showers, particularly this one, what we have is there's a comet orbiting the sun. It's comet 1861 C1861 G1 Thatcher. and that's orbiting around the sun, and then behind it, it leaves a trail of dust particles, and it's as the Earth that's also orbiting around the sun moves through that trail of dust particles. And then as those dust particles, they're not particularly big, but as they then come through the atmosphere, they burn up because, well, they're traveling so quickly. We're talking around 50 kilometers per second, so really fast. As a result, as they hit the air, it doesn't have enough time to move out of the way. And so it just compresses and then heats up and it burns. And so it gets to temperatures of around 1600 Celsius. And so it becomes really hot, which is why we can see these lights coming through, or this light coming through, because it's the burning of those dust particles traveling so fast through our atmosphere. Now, most of them burn up through the atmosphere, but if they could reach the ground, and so then you could get a bit of meteorite arriving, but that's pretty unlikely. But nonetheless, it is a dramatic show, and a couple of things to bear in mind. So the Lyrid meteor shower, it gets its name from the Lyra constellation, because all the meteor showers get their name from the constellation where the meteors appear to emanate from, where the radiant point. But actually, the Lyrid meteor shower, it doesn't actually, its radiant point isn't around the Lyra constellation. It's actually slightly closer to the Hercules constellation. So maybe we really should rename it to the Herculid meteor shower. But anyway, the Lyrid meteor shower, it's actually the oldest on record. There's data going back to 687 BC in China when they first spotted it. And obviously that was way before the night sky was mapped out the way that it is now. And so that's why it got its name as the Lyrid meteor shower. It's very close to the Lyra constellation. They're neighbours, Lyra and Hercules, in the night sky. But what are the chances of seeing it? Well, let's have a little look. And if we go to the early hours of Wednesday morning, that's when you have the greatest chance, really. That's when it's going to be peaking. Fortunately, the moon is going to be below the horizon at this point, so that helps. Unfortunately, there is this big band of rain that I mentioned, and a lot of clouds and blustery winds in association with this. But once that rain's come through, so across parts of South Wales, parts of the West Country as well, there should be some clear skies, some dry weather around. Northern Ireland's looking pretty cloudy. Also across this kind of swathe of central into southeastern England, it's going to be cloudy and wet. But also across parts of northeast England, maybe the tip of East Anglia, and across large chunks of Scotland, a good deal of clear weather here. So a reasonable chance, albeit Orkney, Shetland, here there's another front, maybe more so Shetland than Orkney, another front lingering here. So less good there, but a fair amount of the country actually has a reasonable chance of some clear skies. So if you do want to see it, the advice, go out during the early hours, settle down for around 20 minutes, maybe sit in a deck chair or a garden chair, recline back. You want to look up around 60% above the horizon, and let your eyes settle to the darkness. Ideally, you're away from any artificial sources of light. And then just look. And like I say, there's around 18 an hour, and you should be able to catch one. They'll look like a shooting star. Obviously, it's not a star. Stars don't really move, well, not particularly quickly anyway. It's these dust particles coming from the trail from a comet. And we see those meteors then burning up through our atmosphere. Do let me know if you see any of these, the Lyrid meteor shower tonight. We'd love to see any pictures that you take. Otherwise, any questions you've had about anything that I've said today, do put them in the comments and I'll try to answer some of them either today, or Aidan and Honor can answer them at the end of the week on Friday in our Weather Studio Live, which will be back at 12:15 on our YouTube channel. As I mentioned already, Honor will be here we'll be on YouTube with our 10-day trend tomorrow. And if you need to know a little bit more about what's happening over the next 14 days, well, why not check out my 14-day Outlook video, which is available on our app. I'll be updating that shortly. Thank you so much for watching. Do hit the like button, share this with anyone you think might be interested in, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.